So, I'm about to do something that I have never done before, and that is to run Dungeons and Dragons for complete strangers. So, what I'm doing specifically is that I am volunteering with the library teen D&D program, and I'm volunteering as a dungeon master to run a game for a group of teenagers. Now, I'm not unfamiliar with teenagers. I am also a teacher, and so I've worked in middle schools and high schools, and I know a thing or two about uh, running lesson plans for teenagers, but never have I played Dungeons and Dragons with a group as young, and also I've never played Dungeons and Dragons with people I don't know. Everyone I play with have been my friends, they've been my peers, my parents, and so it's all very new to me, and honestly, I'm kind of freaking out just a little bit. And even as recently as a couple of nights ago, I kind of sat down and was like, okay, the first session is next week. And I caught myself wondering if I even know how to be a dungeon master. I realized that I've been playing this game for over 5 years. And even now, when I'm about to start a new campaign, even if it was a new campaign for people I know and friends of mine, I always get jittery, I always get nervous, and I'm always questioning my own abilities. And this is what a lot of people might refer to as imposter syndrome. And I'm just here to tell you that the anxiety is real, and for some of us, it never goes away. And that's okay. You just have to learn how to deal with it. And for me, the way I will deal with this sort of new game jitters is that I will just prepare like a madman. I'll sit there and think of, okay, what adventure would I want to run? I will spend hours and hours and hours building this campaign and being as prepared as I possibly can be. And then I never feel like it's enough. And it's always enough. It's always just fine. Now, of course, I don't know that until after the first session has gone off without a hitch and has been fantastic. And I get super positive feedback from my players, and you'd think that by now I'd realize, hey, maybe I can have some confidence in my abilities. Well, that's just kind of the nature of imposter syndrome. You really don't ever know how good it's going to be until it happens. And at least for me, it's hard to base any future confidence off of past experience. I tend to be a very direct person, and if I don't get direct verbal feedback from my players that, oh, this was a fantastic game, I'm always questioning whether or not my players had a good time. And the first part in dealing with these feelings and this problem is to know that, first of all, it's happening, and to identify and acknowledge it. Because if I try to ignore these feelings, then I go in unprepared and I'm thinking too hard about how to make it a good time that it actually turns out to be more boring than I intended it to be. So there is something to be said that, it is nice to have the preparation done. And for me, I need to have that done. I need to have my bases covered. It begins to be unhealthy when I start to run in circles, when I've prepared so much that I think I have more to prepare, and really there isn't, and I just kind of keep coming back to the same points over and over again. It's actually something I tend to do in almost any social situation I find myself in. I will repeat myself when I'm telling a story or having a conversation. I'll say the same thing over and over again, and for me, it's like my brain's attempt to either convey a message I don't think is getting through if the people I'm talking to don't elicit the reaction I'm expecting, or sometimes it's just me trying to work it out in my own head and it comes out in my words that I'm having with these people. And I'm going to stop there or else I'll say that over and over again, and I want to avoid that for this video. I'm really just making this to speak to my experience and my own insecurities, and because they are ill-founded. Really, in my experience, every time I've played Dungeons and Dragons, it's always been a good time. And the reason for that, I think, is just the way I approach being a Dungeon Master is I want the players to have fun, and I have a lot of fun when they have a good time. When the players solve a puzzle or they win a combat situation and their characters come on top, it's like, yeah, this is fun. We're having fun. We're doing things our characters want to do. And I have a good time giving them those obstacles, giving them these NPCs and immersing them in the worlds I've created. That's my favorite part of being a dungeon master, is showing them something that I think is cool that I made that they can experience as their characters and enjoy. And here's the thing about being a good dungeon master, in my personal experience, that the truth is, as long as your players have enough information about your world and what's going on, that they can make decisions that affect the world, then you're doing it. You are doing a great job as a dungeon master. The trouble happens when your players are confused or are uncertain about what they are supposed to do next. And that comes with the territory of new players. I've played with a lot of people who have been new to Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games in general. I've tried to translate that into how I narrate the scenario, and I always make sure I leave my players with a clear action that they can take. For example, if I'm setting the scene and they walk into a room in the cellar because they're looking for a key, then I'll say you walk into the cellar, you see there's empty barrels, there's a wine rack covered in cobwebs, and down the middle, the cobblestone is wet and damp from the leaky shed above you. But off in the corner, you see a glint of sunlight reflecting off of some metallic object. And so that informs the players that, oh, there's something shiny over there we can look at. Granted, I feel like that's a pretty pointed example, but it's the way I do things sometimes. So you really don't have to worry about as much as you think you do, especially when you also realize that everything is made up anyway. I think there's some freedom in realizing that, you know what, you are an imposter, and you can revel in that false identity as a master of games and stories, because everything comes from your head. Even if you're running a module, all the NPCs and how you describe them and how you decide to take your characters, your players, through that established adventure is going to be different than anybody else doing it. And it all comes from your imagination and the player's imagination. So yeah, it's kind of, you're all imposters. The players aren't really their characters. You aren't really this omniscient being. You just know enough to inform your players on what actions they can take that moves the plot forward. So when it comes to being an imposter, I think, we kind of go through the stages of grief almost, where first there's, maybe a little different. But first there's fear, the anxiety, the nervousness. Then there's the panic that comes from right before you're about to start a session and you're not as prepared as you think you are. And then maybe you even go through a little bit of denial. Maybe the beginning of your session, like, maybe this is going to be just fine. I don't know if that's denial so much as just maybe jumping straight to acceptance. But I think that's kind of the secret to dealing with imposter syndrome, is just realizing that at the end of the day, if you had fun and your players had fun, then you're a great dungeon master.